My name is Seonaid. I have been a contractor my whole life in a whole lot of different science and tech and education fields. I studied physics, I studied education. I really didn't want to work with computers. I wanted to work with real physical objects. And like almost everybody I know who had a physics education, we all got shunted into computers. And it turned out that I was actually pretty good at them. And as the computers got more powerful, I found more interesting things to do with them. So I've worked mostly in the computer field, but across a whole range of different things. So I've done business analysis, specifications, testing, software development, deployment, engineering, like all kinds of different things. And I've worked, because I've been contracting, I've worked with a lot of senior managers, and all the way from multi-billion-dollar companies down to tiny little things with 5 or 6 employees, and mostly at the director level and above. So people who are making decisions on behalf of their organizations. And what I kept seeing was the same recurring themes in all those places, no matter how big or small, that people are managing from a position of fear all the time because of living in that growth-driven mentality and always chasing the next quarter and the next batch of revenue, that there's a lot of decisions that are made from panicking. So I've also been studying meditation and working as a meditation teacher at workshops and things on the side for the last 20 years. And so this presentation is what I've always wished I could say to my managers. But when you are in a technical role and you're looking at them going, you're making some very interesting choices there, you have to tread that very lightly. So what I've been working on for the last couple of years is getting to provide these kind of workshops for companies I am not contracting for, so that there isn't any conflict of interest in telling people the truth about where their anxieties are impacting on their company. Because what we think and how we actually behave under stress can get really out of alignment. Because the scarcity thing, it's not just thinking, it's deeply embedded in our culture and is deeply embedded actually in our psyches, because we have that fear of being cast out and alone. So what I want to be really clear is I did not use the word mastering, overcoming, or banishing. I think that this is a question of learning to work with the discomfort, being able to be conscious of it as it arises so that you don't react, but you have the capacity to just roll back and respond rather than reacting. So we're not going to try and get rid of it, but we're going to try and be alert to it and sort of familiarize with the sensation. So I start off at the scarcity end of things. And this is where a lot of especially nonprofits wind up working, that there's a not enough and there's a scrabbling. Everybody's making do. They're chasing the next thing. They're always having to grow. They have to, for-profit companies are chasing that growth momentum. They're chasing making their numbers. They want to maybe get to IPO and exit, but there's this fear-based anxiety around a lot of it. And this constant feeling of not enough. This is insufficient. We're not doing enough. We're not growing fast enough. We don't know where the next ones are coming from. So a lot of people they're just going to go all the way over to an abundance mindset instead. They're just going to, they're going to, I have done a lot of these meditations, I have to admit, where you're sitting and you're like, the universe is infinite and we can allow all this to come. And the abundance mindset is that there's more than enough, but it focuses on wealth. And there's an aspect of wishful thinking to it that is really like, we can grow infinitely in a finite world. We've got ingenuity to be able to solve all of these problems. My position is that the abundance mindset is actually the flip side of the same mentality. It's not really addressing the underlying fear of not having enough. It says that the solution to that is to get so much that you are individually secure and safe. And that applies to your company as well. We'll make the company so big and so successful, it's too big to fail. It will be fine forever. So I don't think it actually solves the problem, because I think that you're still operating from a position of fear and from a position of, well, since we know there's not enough, I'm going to make sure I have enough. And that's going to solve the problem. And one of the things I've also observed is, because we're aware there's a sort of greed and grasping to that end of things, nonprofits and charities often react to that abundance mentality by retreating back to the scarcity end of things. So they're underpay their staff, they work too many hours, they don't want people to take vacations because they're like, but this is such important work. How could we possibly deprive our clients of this work? So they wind up with this, like, living in, trying to imagine a more abundant world, but really living in one that's very parched and hard to survive in. So I'm not usually a truth lies in the middle person. I usually think that, I actually tend to go in an orthogonal direction, often some completely unrelated thing. But I think in this case, there genuinely is somewhere in the middle to sit. And that is in the position of sufficiency. Brene Brown's comment was, the opposite of scarcity isn't abundance, it's enough. And so coming to that place where we can genuinely say, oh, I understand sufficiency. And I looked up in the thesaurus, it's interesting, there's a lot of synonyms for abundance. There's a lot of synonyms for scarcity, but sufficiency only had enough and plenty. And I was like, that's sort of interesting. And I was thinking about sort of the character of those words and what plenty means, and the way that we sort of say, there's that, you've got plenty, or the land of plenty. So I want us to sort of think about living in the land of plenty, which is it's related to abundance, but it's got a slightly different tack. So we're going to get there. Though what I want us to do is get to a place where we're realistic, intentional, and especially when running businesses, that we're data driven. So we've got the necessary emotional skills to cope with that pull towards scarcity and that reactivity towards wealth and abundance and grasping, to come back to, I understand this business. I know where the money's coming from. I am a skillful executor on my plans. I know how to get clients, and I know how many I need, and that everything is in balance. So we're aiming for a position of centeredness and balance to make decisions from a place of centered, from a place of center. So I'm going to lead us through about a 5-minute practice of what enough feels like. So this is actually genuinely a practice where I want you to take your hands off the keyboard, take your hands off of any mouse, anything else that's happening in your room, take them off, and you can put them on your desk or you can put them in your lap. And if you can sit with both feet on the ground and in the best posture you can get into in wherever you are, we're going to contemplate what it feels like to have enough satisfaction, and not being sated, not being overly full, not being stuffed, but just like that centered, this is the right quantity. We're looking for the Goldilocks zone. So start off settling into your seat, and you can feel your hands on your legs, feel your feet on the ground, feel your seat on the chair, and know that you are somewhere. You're going to gather all of the threads of attention that have gone off into the outside world and pull them back in, so that the focus of your energy and attention is on the body you inhabit, where you start here and you go down to the ground, and you have hands and you have legs and you have a body that has needs, and we're going to learn to care for those. So take about 2 nice deep breaths. And I want you to imagine how it feels to be a little bit thirsty. It's a slightly hot day. Maybe you went for a walk. You weren't running, you weren't climbing things. You're not desperate. You're just a little bit thirsty. And you come home and you can walk into your kitchen and turn on the faucet and get yourself a glass of water. And I want you to really get this imagination really clear that the first sip of water does make you feel better. You're not picking it up and going glug, 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 because you didn't let yourself you're in that intermediate where you can have that first sip of water and you go, that felt good. And give yourself a moment to like really think about it. You drink about half of the glass of water. And then you're feeling better and you can set the glass of water down on the counter and walk around your kitchen, do whatever you would do. And you can come back and have another sip of the water and set it back down. So that's the place we're looking for, that I know where this is. I know how to solve this problem for myself. Sips and sufficiency are enough. And now we're going to talk about that with clients. And I thought about a bunch of other options, but let's talk about clients. And then we're going to find the Goldilocks zone for incoming work. So we're going to start off with that super scarce. I don't know where the clients are coming from. I'm making sales calls. I've been networking. I've been going to conferences. I've got one client on my roster. Their contract's almost done. I don't know where the next one's coming from. And we're going to sit there for a minute or two and it sucks. We're just going to feel that. Yeah, my lights just flickered. No, I have to finish. I can't leave you there. Okay. Give yourself a moment. This is uncomfortable. I won't leave you here for long. So, what happens if I don't get what if nobody ever calls me again? Maybe I should call that guy back who I didn't really like, who was a really hard client to work with, but at least he paid me. What if this goes badly? Do I have to lay people off? Can I still pay my secretary next month? And go, okay, this sucks. This sucks. Okay, we have to follow up on every single person who ever called us. We're going to make 42 calls this month. Okay, go. And so you and your colleagues, you're making all of your phone calls and oh my gosh. Oh no. 9 people just said yes, and you only have 5 employees that you can send out to staff for them. And everybody's going to have to work 60-hour weeks now, but you can't say no. What if they don't come back to you? Okay, wait. No, this is abundant. This is what we were looking for. This is where we wanted to be. Look at all the revenue. Oh my gosh, look at the money that's coming in. Oh, what if we said no? What if we set a service level agreement? What if we said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't take you on as a client for 8 more weeks? What if they said no? What if they go to somebody else? Now we're in too many clients, too many hours, it's too much. Oh my gosh, this is abundant, but it feels awful. And I want you to notice that is a reactive maneuver to come. And now there's a temptation almost to go, this is too much. I'm going to go back to scarcity because that felt better than this frantic, stressful chasing. Okay. Shake that off. That sucks. Those are both terrible places to live. And I've lived in both of them. I've lived in companies that were in both of them. Never had a pleasant experience at either one of those ends. Shake it off. You can actually shake your hands. You can shake your body and bring your feet back onto the ground, because I know that's a really frantic, anxious, like high up in the body kind of sensation. There's no touching the ground there. We're going to get back into the feet. Back into the seats. We want to make decisions from lower down in our bodies. So the next thing we're going to do is picturing and imagining that right-sized business, how it feels to have a business that you understand that is going well. Okay. So this is going to look different for different people. If you're a solo entrepreneur, it means you have the right number of incoming clients. You have enough connections that if I make a phone call and I need another client, I'll get somebody over the next 6 weeks and there's no concerns. If you're in a slightly larger organization, maybe your company's growing at a sustainable rate, or you've gotten it to the size, you understand it, You've covered all your administrative costs. You've got an actual sales team. You get to focus on the work you genuinely wanted to be doing. You have an onboarding strategy. You have really good rate settings so that you know that you make a profit on your clients. You know that you can pay all your bills, and a profit in the way that Melanie was talking about, whereas the retrained earnings, not that disbursement. And you have really good boundaries around time and expectations. So things are going well. Okay. Feel how it would feel in your body to get up in the morning and go to work where you know you've got a handle on things and it's neither too big nor too small. It's a Goldilocks company. And then I want a little flicker where you get a big unexpected expense in 1 month. Not hugely devastating. You're not at any risk, but maybe you get like 5% of your normal expenses for a year because one of your offices flood. And let that little flicker of fear rise up. Oh no, what if this is how it goes? What if this goes wrong? What does it do to your body when that little flicker of fear rises up? And let that temptation to overcompensate. Oh, we have to never have this happen again. So you've had that experience of being centered, and you've had that experience of fearing of the scarcity, and you have that experience of thinking we're gonna reach for this grasping solution, and then roll back into the base and come back to that sip of glass of water on a slightly hot day. You just need that. You have that pair of skills of being able to, you can feel your body in the ground and you can say, okay, I know what it feels like to have sufficient. How do I get the business to be aligned with that sort of sufficiency? So this is how I get to feel in my body when I get up and go to work in the morning. So for me, that's the goal. That's living the dream for me, is that beautiful, grounded, centered place where we're not pulled off balance by those two things. And that when that happens, we have skills to pull ourselves back and go, right now, I know what's happening. This isn't magic. And it's not a worldview. This isn't a worldview. It's founded in a practical reality. So I'm not suggesting that you ignore when you genuinely need to have more clients. And I'm not suggesting that you can just center yourself when you have overextended your company and you are in that running ahead of the train. But you have the capacity to develop skills that can help pull you back to center, and that will start to impact what decisions get made so that you can spend more and more time in that middle center Goldilocks place. So take another deep breath, feel your feet on the ground, and does anybody have any questions?
That was super beautiful, Shona. This isn't really a question, but this is maybe more of a comment. It reminds me of some books. There's one particular book that's called The Big Enough Company. That's also just about this particular point. And another thing this kind of reminds me a bit of is sort of lifestyle design, a la Tim Ferriss, kind of. I mean, he's a bit Silicon Valley, but he really makes good points that you have time, and you have sort of what you want to be doing in your life, and then there's money, and there's work, and that you can also definitely mess up the balance on that one as well. And I also really love
in that field that I think are probably better than Tim Ferriss.
Mm-hmm.
I've read the 4-Hour Work Week, and there is still quite a hustle culture built into that, even though he uses it to give himself time to go take the dance, but he still like becomes a world-class tangoer or something. Like
Yeah.
Goes from one hustle to another. And I'm kind of a world-class rock skipper now. Not like competitive. I just like going and standing by the water and throwing rocks and watching them. So I see Anna has a question. Oh, she's gone.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
So one thing that you mentioned, Shona, a lot is the use of the body as a way of sort of gauging a kind of an emotional state as well as a really amazing, nuanced learning there. Can you say a little more about that and how what your learning is like for that?
Yes.
The ground, upper lower chest.
So I actually have a certificate in embodiment coaching that I did during the pandemic online, which was super surprising to me, but it was really effective. I did a lot of work in education. I studied education. I did graduate work in it. And a lot of that became about the difference between the cognitive models of disciplines and their sort of underlying belief systems. And what I realized was that I was working in faculty development, and a lot of the ways in which we could think things, but we hadn't really enacted them. And I was working with the School of Nursing, and they were talking to me about somatic memory. So because I had this weird distributed education that went from physics to education to working with like feminist pedagogy, the feminist pedagogy part really talks about how what we learn is embedded in our bodies. And so I did a lot of study on cognition and embodied cognition. And then I did this embodiment coaching program because I just could see so many of us can think something and we can articulate it. And the gap between our cognitive model of reality and how we act in the world can still be quite large. And so I always think of this as like incorporating our cognitive models where we can say, hey, this is the better world I can envision. How do I enact that? How do I bring that out into the world so that my default responses come from, I guess, a belief in the possibility of that better world that we're leaning into?
Thanks to that.
I have one more question for you, Shona, something I'm also a bit curious about. You were saying to ground this in data, just to make sure that we can sort of really hit the sweet spot without too much guessing and relying on our own emotional feelings. But how? Like in practical terms, I mean, where do we get that data from, and how do we crunch it?
In practical terms, like I've got like 22 points, and I did one of them today. One of the things is that you need to genuinely be good at business. You need to be able to read your financials. You need to be able to understand what you need. You need to have realistic expectations of what your overheads are going to be and what your margins need to be. You need to have realistic pricing. And so this is to one of the things I found was that people who are working in that scarcity or abundance mindset are really bad at holding on to the realistic pricing of things, because if they're feeling that scarcity, anxiety, fearfulness, a lot of them will go to like severely underpricing, and then they've made that scarcity for themselves that they were afraid of, because they're scared that if they charge enough to cover all their expenses, that they'll never get another client again. And so they make this self-fulfilling prophecy of not being able to make ends meet and working too many hours for not enough money to cover their bases. And so I'm like, you need to be able to address the emotional content, and that gives you the place to sit, to look at your numbers and say, oh, these numbers don't add up. And it's not because there's something wrong with me. It's because I need to charge 15% more to make this work. And if you look at them and they don't add up and you're in that scarcity mindset, you'll be like, oh no, this is never going to work. And if you can get centered, you can go, I need to increase my prices by 15%. So it's like connect to reality and don't try to work in either one of those. But if only this world were different than it is. So, no, this is how much it costs to keep the lights on.
Yeah. I say preach, sister. I mean, this is definitely something I've experienced myself. And, as long as you don't have the data, then indeed you just constantly live in fear and act incredibly conservatively because you just don't have the grounding to be able to do any better.
Yeah. So like as much as it's important to really be good at your whatever it is that you're selling, somebody in your company needs to be really good at business and the numbers because they have to add up. They have to add up. There's some things that are just, you can't get electricity for less than this. If you need travel to go to conferences, this is the minimum amount you can spend on that. So
thank you, Shona. All right. So yeah, that was really beautiful.